Sometimes you just need to turn off the distractions, get to work, and find the universal truths that affect us all and that govern our universe. This is a good place to do that. Mark Fults and Kat Hobson will try to help with that a bit by bringing fantastic guests. Let's see what's happening tonight.
Welcome to Universal Truths with Mark Fults, and I'm coming to you from WBHM-DB in Birmingham, Alabama. And of course, I live in beautiful Pensacola, Florida. And I'm coming to you tonight with stories of the weird and unusual. And on this show, we cover a lot of metaphysical subjects, some of them very sweet and kind and fluffy. And then some of the other things are a little heavier and a little weirder. And tonight is probably going to be a little weirder for you. So, buckle up, Buttercup. It's going to be a bumpy night. What I'm going to talk about tonight will be, I had done a book several years ago called The Darkest Corner. And it was about dolls and also people who had taken people's bodies and treated them as dolls or as in magical purposes or in other strange circumstances. So I was in the store I work in, which is Live and Let Live, metaphysical store in Pensacola, which if you want to come see me, that's where you can see me. You can call ahead and make sure I'm there, but usually I'm there on Friday and Saturday. And I have my doll collection, my haunted doll collection that everyone just gets drawn to. And there's particular dolls that always catches everyone's attention. They're front and center, which is my effigy dolls. And people are always fascinated, how does a 60-year-old metaphysical person collect haunted dolls, or what gets you interested in it? What's the draw? What tends to make them haunted? And in society right now, we have the Warrens' stories about Annabelle, which, being 60 years old, I've been reading things about the Warrens since the 60s. And so when the first time I heard about their story of the Annabelle, the rag doll, which looked a little bit more sinister because she was just such an innocent looking doll for it to be doing what they say happens with it, So I became fascinated with that. And through the years, I've been very lucky to, when I'm looking for something particular, I magnetize it to me and it'll come across my path. And, there's millions and millions and millions of dolls out there. And there's only a small percentage of them that I would say are haunted. But the ones that are, you cannot. Sometimes you can't turn your head away from them. I've encountered one really bad one, and then the rest of them have been very sweetly haunted or sadly haunted or just have a consciousness. And so I'm going to try tonight to start delving into what are dolls. They're not just a fun little piece of plastic little girls and boys get to play with. They have probably they go back as far as we do, because the original dolls and forms of people, because it's us. It's a representation of us as living people. And thousands of years ago, depending upon, because some people think the earth and people are only 6,000 years old, some other people a lot longer. But as long as man has been able to think, they have they did everything with ritual. Even before they could speak a language, they knew, if I want it to rain, I need to do a dance to make it rain. If I need a crop to eat, or a deer to eat, to live, to keep my family alive, I'm going to need to tell the universe what I need, so that I can keep that happening, so that I will have plenty to eat from the field. I will have plenty of hunt to feed my family, feed my children. I will have plenty of water, so I don't, die of thirst. So man would come up with these rituals to say, now look, gods, or look, universe, I'm doing this so you'll understand. And, for the hunt, the leader would put on a deer hide and the horns, and the other people from the tribe would reenact hunting the deer, so that you could show the universe. And that's like the thing with witches, when they would say, they'd see witches flying. It's not what it was. It came from women in the villages to show the crops how high to grow. They'd get us a stick or a limb off a tree. They would put make a broom on it and show it. They would jump on the broom to show how high the crops needed to grow. And, then when Christian missionaries saw that, they thought they were flying. They weren't flying. They were showing the crops how high to grow. Because if you make a ritual out of it, then you feel like you have a control in the output of it, that you're having a hand in it, and the gods are going to listen to you, and you're going to do that. And then, that's why people, too, would do sacrifice and things like that. They got to where we have to give them something, so they'll give us something. So we have to give them a blood offering, or a vegetable offering, or a person offering to get what we want. So it got very elaborate. But we as people, we always have rituals of some sort. We make rituals out of just our daily life, because that's kind of wired into our consciousness. And like I said, people were doing this before they even had a language to say, hey, this is what we're doing. They knew almost telepathically, or maybe even telepathically, how to get across the point. And ritual became a very human, basic thing. It became, they knew the cycles of the moon. They knew the equinoxes, the solstices. They knew when to plant. They knew when to watch the moon and watch the sun and know when's the right time to do this or to do that. They kept track of every day, because every day was important astrologically. And we don't do it like that now, but they were very serious about it. So everything had a ritual. And then when it came to people, dolls that were being made, or figurines, I don't know if you would call them dolls, but they were representations of people. So they would make these representations, which eventually looked like dolls or became dolls. And they'd make them out of clay or bone or rock. And they weren't necessarily made for children's play toys. They were made to use in ritual. And, you know, if somebody was sick, you'd make a figure of them. And it's kind of, I guess you would call it sympathetic magic. Someone has an ailment that maybe they don't have the ability to do surgery, or they don't know what to do for that person's ailment. So they would do this doll of the figure, and they would show it to the gods, and they would they would pinpoint it with sticks or with pins, and say, this is where the problem is. We need to get some healing into this. So using the doll, they would use the tribe and use their energy and put energy on that. Or they would tell the gods, say, she's having trouble in her left side. So there's something here. Let's see if we can get some healing there. So it could be used for healing, for divination. It could be used for healing. And then later, I guess, it could be a tool to hurt. Because you could take a figure of your warring tribe that you have a conflict with, and you could say, well, this is the chief, so this doll is the chief, and this is what I want to happen to him, and stick pins in it, or cut an arm off, whatever they would do, to say, stop this person from hurting me, or stop my enemy, or bring this energy to the enemy. And they're making a form to tell the universe, to tell the gods, to tell the spirits, this is who this person is. And I've taken their hair and their clippings and their a piece of their clothing, or it's them. And they would use it as a tool. But in some places, they would do healing things with the dolls, and then after they were finished with the ceremonies, sometimes they would give the dolls to the children. And then later on, they began to make dolls and things as toys for the children, specifically, that were not ceremonial. But the thing with it is, it was used as a vessel. And a lot of times, even because of our consciousness, the way that we embed our energy into things, it can, we can put some of our energy too much into an object, like a toy or an item, and we embed it with our consciousness, which then off of that, it gets a consciousness, and it can go, I can think. So then it will figure out if it needs what it needs to do. Sometimes it can be very basic, or it can be very complex. And it depends all upon the purpose, the intent, and the reasoning. So I'm kind of going to go into that tonight. And then I'll go into, what the process of how we embed our energy into something to give it a consciousness. And then there are some dolls and things like that that have spirits in them, or consciousness. That's not a spirit thing per se, but a consciousness. because it can have a spirit or it can just be a consciousness. And how we do that, the process, because we're very complex in a way, simply complex. And we do a lot of things now that we don't realize we're doing. And in that way. And two, now the scientists are looking at a thing called transferring of self. And that's really what you're doing. Sometimes you transfer yourself into a vessel, into a piece of, that's how you get antiques. And sometimes they have the spirit of the person. That's why when we're talking mirrors, mirrors can have the transference of self because the spirit is seeing the mirror and it knows the body's dying. But if it looks in the mirror, it can see itself. So in a way, it can live through that reflection. So then it transfers itself into that glass and can live on. Because, I've talked before about my haunted mirrors. I have 2 haunted mirrors, and I have one in my front room that I can watch every week as, the spirit turns the vases on it and everything else. It's in the mirror. It's not doing anything to anyone around. It's just in a safe place. And by being in a reflection, if they want to remember who they are, they can see themselves. So, and then on the opposite hand, if you're dealing with a very bad spirit, sometimes they don't want to see their reflection. So a mirror can keep a bad spirit out of your house if it's a certain type that they haven't been able to keep. They don't project their image the way it was. Maybe their energy is downgraded or degraded, and they get to see themselves as they are in the grave, or, which is not pretty. And it disturbs them to know that they're conscious, but they look like that. So sometimes the mirror repels a spirit. And it's just one of those very unique and unusual things. So, we're very flexible energy and flexible spirits. So, and 2, we have to be careful not to put our stuff into things, inanimate objects, so easily, so that we don't kind of leave our essence running, the personality running, while the body and the spirit have gone on, because sometimes that happens. So this will kind of cover some of that. But and when we come back from our break here in a minute, I'll get into the doll issue because, but I'm starting from the history of they are us, they're vessels, and now they're play toys. And 2, if with children, if they don't have a lot of playmates, if they have a very strange life, they will very intensely, their toys become their friends. So they will put their energy into that, and it will become a thinking friend sometimes. So it's a little complex, but simply complex. But we're going to have to go to a break, but we'll be back just shortly. So all of you out there in the dark, don't touch that dial.
You are listening to WBHM Digital Broadcasting, Birmingham, Alabama.
Paratalk Radio is your one-stop for all things paranormal, the unknown, and the supernatural. Join us every Monday night at 8 p.m. Eastern, 7 p.m. Central for discussions and guests on topics such as ghosts, hauntings, Bigfoot, UFOs, and more. This broadcast is rated M for mature and intended for listeners over 16 on paratalkradio.com.
Oh, come on. I'm Southern, but... Nope. That'll do. Hello. I am Kat Hobson, host of Paranormal Experience here on WBHM Digital Broadcasting out of Birmingham, Alabama. I enjoy having guests from all areas of the paranormal, from ghosts to ufology to cryptids and beyond. You'll find some of the best researchers in their fields bringing you some great information. Join me on Wednesday nights from 8 to 10 p. Eastern here on WBHM Digital Broadcasting.
Since 1948, Fate magazine has brought you reports of the strange and unknown, all of them true. Fate Radio is carrying on that tradition, bringing you the unusual, macabre, strange, and bizarre. Join host Kat Hobson Sunday nights from 8 to 10 p.m. Eastern on WBHM Digital Broadcasting.
Thank you for listening to WBHM Digital Broadcasting out of Birmingham, Alabama.
Since 1948, Fate magazine has brought you reports of the strange and unknown, all of them true. Fate Radio is carrying on that tradition, bringing you the unusual, macabre, strange, and bizarre. Join host Kat Hobson Sunday nights from 8 to 10 p.m. Eastern on WBHM Digital Broadcasting.
The time is 23 minutes after the hour.
Welcome back to Universal Truth with Mark Fults, coming to you from WBHM-DB in beautiful Birmingham, Alabama. And again, I'm coming to you from my home in Pensacola, Florida. And we're talking about dolls, the history, kind of that. And I'll explain also the other part of the show is going to be a little weirder than this. And if you go, what's weirder than this? Talking about dolls while they're possessed or anything. But like I said, I did a book called The Darkest Corner. I was going to make it a three-parter, but the first part was about dolls and people who primitively have started using, they've been caught using dead bodies as dolls or deceased people. And I've actually had a run-in with something of someone who was doing that or intending on that. And that's what made me write this book, which this one, I've got to go back and redo it because I had just started really collecting my doll collection, my haunted doll collection. And I needed a specific kind of doll for the cover because I wanted it to be riveting. And I magnetized what I needed and put it out there basically put it on the internet. And within 30 minutes, I found the one that I needed. And it was a effigy doll and with a lot of damage to her, but she was perfect for what I needed. And she made she's very scary looking when you first see her. And when you find out the story or you get around her, the energy, it becomes very sad and tragic and sweet. But to look at her head on, she's very disturbing. So that was what I was looking for. And then after I'd done the book, I really found out more about my doll and who she was intended to represent. And so I got to go back and redo the book. But it was a subject that fascinated me, because you could hold this doll. You don't have to hold this doll. You just have to be in the room with this doll, and you're in the presence of a thinking consciousness. And I have it in my room where I work, where I do tarot and things like that. And she's really attached to women, especially mother types. And if she really wants to be held, the women will go, she's looking at me. And then sometimes she'll even shake a little in the cabinet. And they'll go, that doll is doing something. And her eyes are always usually very dull, gray. But when they're activated, they turn bright blue and they turn violet. And they want that person to hold them. And some people freak out, and then they'll hold her. And then when you hold her, you feel the energy, you feel the sweetness of that doll. But it's something. It's a relic from the Victorian days, but it's actually kind of a throwback to other primitive things. But and then too, at that time, photography had come in, but not very many people could afford photography in the 1880s. And they would have these wax blank doll heads ready. The funeral home would have them ready as part of what they would call the memento mori kind of stuff. And so if you had a child who died, if you couldn't afford them to do the full out thing, which they would take the casting of the hands, the face, and then right before they buried the child, they would go in and remove all the hair, put the hair into the wax doll, melted onto the wax doll's head, put the eyebrows, the eyelashes, everything. And it would be a doll that represented your child. And those dolls are phenomenally rare now, but they were very common for a while. I've seen one extra when I was younger. This one was an economy one, but these people's baby died when it was 9 months old. So they had this wax doll. They put the hair of the baby on it, and the mother took care of the baby. And she just treated it as her baby. It was a way of mourning and keeping that child close to the mother. So it stayed a perpetual baby. And, of course, she kept it in the cradle, but she would hold it. And that's what that energy is. She put her energy into it. And it just became like a baby consciousness that just wants to be loved, that wants to be snuggled, that wants to be held. Even though it's unsettling in our modern eyes, it's actually a very sweet, comforting thing from that era. But of course, one day, the mother dies, the family dies. This doll was damaged very badly. Who knows how long she had been put in storage or put away, because she wasn't pretty in doll collecting terms. And when she came to me, it's actually she's like my child. I've actually had offers for her and other dolls that I have, and I'm like, I can't sell them. They're my babies, because you become their protector. And But before I finish into all of it, I guess I better talk about how is it that our energy works, our system works, to where we're putting our energy into these dolls, and these dolls become the vessels for our energy, or maybe they're an open energy for a invasive energy that's destructive or angry or that isn't human. But how do we transfer our energy really into this vessel? So in metaphysics, what we've got, everything starts in the head. You know, you've got the third eye, the hypothalamus, pituitary gland, which controls and regulates what goes through the neurons. And we have what they call PSI energy, and it's not really, people don't know a lot about what it is, except that we have it. But what I think it is because, I mean, our soul, when it comes into our body, the soul is separate from the spirit. So the soul comes from like an ancient pool of energy that has a little tether that comes in. It goes into the body when the baby is born, and it remains that spirit sliver all through your life. And then when you die, it follows that little trail back, that little cord back. And then your spirit that you created is you. But the soul is just an ancient energy. And that's why, you know, when they talk about our silver thread, that thread is a fiber optic cord that goes to the soul, the old energy. So it goes, we have a connection to it. And that little thread, which comes through our solar plexus, it feeds the soul without the soul having to eat up our body. You know, it gives it its own energy. Well, we have a lot of energy that comes from our ectoplasm or plasma. We have a plasma. Everything we're around is some kind of electromagnetic plasma. So when you're thinking and the energy is coming, really thought is energy. So when the thought comes out through the neurons, which is a plasma based material there, the thread comes out basically through the nucleus of the neuron, through the neuron, and it comes from the crown energy at the top of your head and goes usually down through your aura. But when we're holding items like a doll or something that we're energizing, if you're doing metaphysics, there's like a little fiber optic thread of thought that comes out of the top of your head, goes down through your left hand, crosses over from the energy center of your left to your right hand. So you have the light, fiber optic light coming from your head, down your hands, across to your right hand, then back up to the crown of your head, so to the neurons. So it makes like a triangular thread that keeps cycling. So when you hold something between your hands and you're putting that energy, that happiness, that sorrow, that drama, that emotion, there is nothing more intense for us as spirits in a human, having a human experience here, than emotion. Because when you're a spirit, that's what you are. You're an uncontained emotion. So a child who has a doll that has a bad life or a rough life, they cling to that doll. They put their energy into that doll. They put their love into that doll. If they're not getting love from other people, they put that love. They have to love something, so they put that love into that vessel. And if you put enough energy into it through happiness, sadness, whatever, it's like you're taking a sample of your consciousness and putting it into that vessel. So sometimes a lot of dolls are they're haunted basically or embedded with a feeling, not especially a consciousness. But then again, sometimes it will get the essence of that child. It may not have the soul of the child, but it'll have part of the spirit consciousness of the child. Then there are sometimes that there are spirits that get in the containers of a doll or an antique or a piece of something or even jewelry. And that's just a whole different kind of thing. That's like the Annabelle story. That would be a doll that has, it had enough human consciousness in it. And then what happened is something else used that consciousness as a building block to get a grip in that doll. So what's in the doll is not a nice, sweet little girl energy. It's something else. And there are so many other energies out there. You know, when they look at us, what they see is it looks like we're lights on a foggy street, so they go to that light on the foggy street. They see you as a light, and they go to it. And a lot of times as people, we have protective systems in our aura. But if you're an inanimate object, you don't have that. So if there's some kind of essence there that they can kind of like magnetize into or use as a glue to hold them in there, then they can get in there and they can think. The only bad doll, which I've talked about this on my radio show several times, I guess, I took care of a person for 20 years. Somebody gave her she liked dolls. And they gave her this doll that had been mistreated, and it really didn't like people. And I would hear her arguing with it. And I'd say, what is wrong with you? And she goes, I'm trying to be nice to this doll, but she hates me. She hates me. And finally, she took it and put it in the basement. I don't know how she got in there because she was disabled. But she put that doll in the basement. I was like, okay, I'm not going to question it. So not too long after that, I moved. She went another direction. I went my direction. And I moved an hour away. She wouldn't know. Nobody would know who, in that circumstance, didn't know where I was going because I was moving. And that doll was in the house. The person that owned the doll, that didn't want the doll, was disabled. She had her rides separately, differently. She would not have been able to do this. And she had no idea where I went. And I was in my new house in the country, 50 miles away from where I'd been. And on the third or fourth day, I went out on the back porch. There's that doll sitting there staring at me. And you could just feel it. You could feel it. She was coming to me, but she didn't like me either. And I was like, oh, no, sister. No, sister. And so I fixed her up a nice outfit. I put her online, and I sold her at that time because I was going through so many things. I couldn't have to sleep with my eye open to watch this doll that hated my guts. And I didn't want to put her in a container somewhere. I think that's not right either, to where she couldn't live, or be a consciousness. And so I found somebody who wanted her, and I made sure before I let her go, it was an okay circumstance. And I sent her to them, someone who wanted that. But the ones that I have in my collection, they're all fairly mild. Like I said, the one that is Elizabeth Brown, who they called her Lizzie, she's the most active. But then I have a great big 50s supermarket doll. They used to call them Sweet Gale and all this. She's got an energy in her where her eyes kind of follow you, and they're not made to do that. It was a simple what they used to call a supermarket doll, because you would have them, you would go in, and the supermarkets would have different toy lines that they would push in the 50s and 60s. And you would go in, and on top of some of like the freezers, or they'd have these kind of display cabinets where they had a flat top. And so you would set these dolls and toys, all the current stuff that you couldn't get in the toy stores, you would only get them through the supermarkets. They were specials. And they'd put them on top of those. And so you would see these dolls. And this doll, she's like a 30-inch doll, very big. But all she does is she'll stare at you, and you know it. People kind of like her for some reason. She's kind of cool. There's something cool about her. I have a 10-headed doll that's from probably 1900. She's very shy energy. Whoever owned her was very shy, achingly shy. And if I put her in the cabinet in a way where she can turn, she turns, so you're not looking at her directly. Right now I have her fixed where I fixed her in a little better position, but I know that she doesn't like it that much. I've got to figure it out for her because she turns and kind of hides herself. And then I have one that I just put in. Her name is Evangeline. And she's just a very, kind of a sad, but very sweet energy. I've fixed her up as a gypsy doll. She was made in 1922. Beautiful, beautiful doll. But you can tell she needs, that's the thing with toys and dolls. They get used to love and this energy. Then they're hungry for that vibration. So some of them, I take them out and I let people around me who work in the store, I'll say, hold this doll for a minute, give her some energy. Or the people who come in will look at them and I'll say, she's wanting to be held. And I'll let them hold these 120-year-old dolls, 140-year-old dolls, and they're really moved by them. And they're really attracted to them. And but in metaphysics, we're used to that kind of thing. And in the 70s, they used to have a thing where I knew somebody who would take a box and put a consciousness into the box. I thought, that's terrible. Don't do that. But they would do that. And then prove that the box had a consciousness, which is like the scientific transferring of self thing. It was in a metaphysical form. So we're going to have to go to a break right now. So when we come back, we're going to continue on with the dolls. And then the second half, I'll have to get into some of the weirder stuff, if this ain't weird enough for you. So now, all of you out there in the dark, don't touch that dial.
You're listening to WBHM Digital Broadcasting, the best in paranormal talk, only on Paranormal Experience Radio, broadcasting live out of Birmingham, Alabama.
Oh, come on. I'm Southern, but... nope. That'll do. Hello. I am Kat Hobson, host of Paranormal Experience here on WBHM Digital Broadcasting out of Birmingham, Alabama. I enjoy having guests from all areas of the paranormal, from ghosts to ufology to cryptids and beyond. You'll find some of the best researchers in their fields bringing you some great information. Join me on Wednesday nights from 8 to 10 p. Eastern here on WBHM Digital Broadcasting.
Since 1948, Fate magazine has brought you reports of the strange and unknown, all of them true. Fate Radio is carrying on that tradition, bringing you the unusual, macabre, strange, and bizarre. Join host Kat Hobson Sunday nights from 8 to 10 p.m. Eastern on WBHM Digital Broadcasting.
You're listening to WBHM Digital Broadcasting, the best in paranormal talk, only on Paranormal Experienced Radio, broadcasting live out of Birmingham, Alabama.
Welcome back to Universal Truths with Mark Fults, and coming to you from WBHM-DB in beautiful Birmingham, Alabama, and I'm living in beautiful Pensacola, Florida, which is just like a little slice of heaven for me. So we are talking tonight about the odd thing of dolls, haunted dolls, which, because of the way that we put our energies into things, not only do we have haunted dolls, we have haunted antiques, certainly mirrors. I have had a piece or two of haunted jewelry, and I have my friend Tia Gray has a collection of memento mori, which, in memory stuff that people used to make and used to have, like jewelry made from your hair, or I have a piece of somewhere of a piece of a dress of Mary Todd Lincoln. So when you hold that in it, that piece of cloth, you get a vibe out of it of her, because she was so intense. Anyway, but I tell Teal, I say, you collect dead people's hair. And so we both collect weird things. And I've always been drawn to the macabre. And as a little boy, and I can say that I understand the intensity children get with their toys and with their things, because especially if you don't have a lot of friends when you're little and you're in a not so happy situation at home, your toys become your connection to something that you can protect yourself with. So you make a fantasy world, or you really glob onto these things, and you really put your energy into your stuffed animals and your dolls. And people stuffed animals, because of the fabric and stuff they can be haunted as well. I've got a haunted teddy bear. It's very sweet, but it's a haunted teddy bear. And see, that becomes a thing too as a metaphysical person, as your aura and everything becomes your tool and your perceptional tool. You can tell by reading the auras of these energies. So if you pick up a piece of jewelry, or something, you're also your energy, your aura will read the aura of that piece. So then that's what they call psychometry. And you can hold a piece, say, like if you're looking for a missing person, if they give you a piece of their clothes or a piece of their jewelry or something like that, you're able, if you're, depending upon your skill level, you're able to read that energy and tell something about that person. And if you're lucky, that energy is an essence or a fiber optic trail to them. So you can maybe follow that energy and see how they're doing. Are they alive? Are they dead? Or you can tell their story. Well, the same thing with dolls and teddy bears and jewelry and clothing. And now there's a lot of, when I was young, it was still getting into the new part of it. But, the hippies began, they were, when in the 60s, they were just real funky. And they didn't want to follow any of the regular rules that were going on. They didn't want to just go buy clothes that everyone else was wearing. So they would go to the thrift stores, and they would get clothes that were one of a kind or different. And when Dark Shadows came out, they started wearing capes and velvets and gypsy clothes. And there was a great a great style that I love, which I designed some of my stuff off of, which was the rich gypsy look, which was beautiful, actually. It wasn't, people didn't do it very long, but it was beautiful. And the girls would wear these beautiful scarves. If you remember the show Rhoda, it was kind of, came from the 60s going into the 70s. She was wearing these beautiful bandanas and stuff like that. And that kind of came off of the rich hippie look, and they wear these suede boots and these silk and velvet skirts, and the guys would wear poet shirts and they were jackets and they would just do all this really funky anything. They just mix all sorts of things. Anything that wasn't what you expected. And so, there was just a whole different thing going on when I was a kid. And so there were a lot of things that just weren't expected. And I came from the 60s where it was just, it was just interesting. And, but there were so many fascinating toys and things I had from the 60s that were fabulous. And since I didn't have a good other life, I lived my life in my belongings for a while. And so I understand the putting of your energy into something and somebody else picking it up later and going, "Ooh, I feel that." It happens all the time. And then if it's owned by multiple people, then each of them are putting their energy into it. So it's like the way energy gets stronger is it collects energy. It's like static electricity. It just picks up like picking up wind. It just picks up more energy and more energy. And the more conscious it is, the more it picks up that energy and grows and thinks and becomes. So even though we're in the modern era, we're still doing things that are primitive, that are in our nature, in our bodies. Our bodies are transmitting energies that we're not conscious of sometimes. And if you're in metaphysics, you're made aware of that. You become conscious that you have to be careful. Because if you're mad, you can shoot that energy out there like you're shooting a gun. It will come back in your aura because you have your aura a sphere, and around it you have a little orbit. So whatever you do, it will come right back to you. So that's why I always say, always send things out with love, because if you do, if it comes back, it's just going to give you love. If you send out something in anger or something, when you send out something negative, positive just flows from you. Negative takes effort. You have to build it. It becomes hungry. It takes a lot of energy. So it becomes a hungry energy, and you have to keep it fed. And sometimes that energy if you have that energy and you put that into an item, that item, like a doll, if it has a consciousness and it can think and it needs to figure out how to eat by scaring you or by making a noise or getting around something where it can pull energy from something electrical, it'll do it. And I know from the doll that I have in the store, she is quite capable of moving, because we sat there and watched her. When she wanted to get held, she started moving. She started shimmering. And she's not capable of walking, but, I've noticed that, there's one of my favorite things to watch on YouTube, which I'm not affiliated with them or anything, but they, now it went out of my head, Slap Cam. They have these great videos, and there's some of them, they have the haunted dolls. And the spirit just gets in the doll and acts like a human. It just sees through the eyes of the doll. So if it sees through the eye of the doll, it can actually move as a person would by using its limbs, or because of its magnetic self or magnetic electromagnetic plasma, it could magnetize itself to move or to do. But sometimes you'll watch them, and the ones that really have the straight in there, you'll see it. There's one that I remember looking at where it was a type of doll. You turn the arm and the face would change. And my niece had one in the 70s. And that particular doll on this show was broken. But when it wants to see, it goes click, and the eyes move. The face moves, and it's broken, so it can't do it. And it's doing it. And I've seen a doll that can rock on a rocking chair. It's haunted. If the people who have it, you'll hear it, the spirit of the doll, moving around, doing things. I remember reading one where these people, I wanted this one doll, but the person I was living with was like, that ain't coming in this house, because they had it in their, they had to put it in their garage because you could hear them talk. It was several dolls in a box, but you could hear them talking to each other, and they would move around. And so they put them in the garage, and they were trying to sell them. And you could tell when you looked at them, they had something going on. And I was like, "Ooh, I want that." And the person I was living with was like, "Hey, no, that's not coming in our house." And they were like, she was like freaked out. She's like, "I would never sleep again if that doll lived here." So I had to let it go, but it was, and it was pretty well anyway, because it went for a lot of money. And that's another thing. The consciousness now, because of like things like Annabelle, people want haunted dolls. They want the scary dolls. And it's a thing now. So I've been collecting dolls for a while, but each one has to have an energy in them. I'm not just taking up one going, it's old, but it's kind of cool. It has to speak to me, basically. And it's a huge thing now. People look particularly for these haunted dolls. And, and then some people really want the scary ones. But I saw this one where this guy had a scary one he bought on purpose. And it started acting up, and he burned it. And I thought, I don't know how I feel about that, because sometimes when you burn things, you release things. But sometimes it's also, you don't know what, if it's a consciousness, I don't know that you want to release that, because sometimes they're in the vessel. It's like the genie is in the bottle. And if you remember I Dream of Genie, they put a little stopper on the bottle and all this stuff. Sometimes you want to keep the genie in the bottle. And like I said, some are not human energies. There are some inanimate objects that have vicious or strange or scary energies that they've globbed onto it, because maybe we've opened the door for it, or someone, by putting a personality into this toy, gave it an opportunity. Maybe there was something hanging around them, and they went, "Oh, I can go into that." So, and like I said, the scientists are doing transferring of self. They're practicing people transferring themselves into other people's bodies. And they apparently are coming up with some interesting data. But what they want to eventually do is be able to transfer yourself, your soul essence, into a computer, which I'm totally against that, but it's a real thing. Well, now we're going to have to go and take a break. I think this is at the top of the hour break, so it's like 5 minutes. So run and grab you something to drink. But for all you people out there in the dark, don't touch that dial. We'll be right back.
Live from NPR News in Washington, I'm Jack Speer. The U.S. Supreme Court has handed down its opinion in a critical environmental regulation case, West Virginia versus the Environmental Protection Agency. NPR's Laura Benshoff reports it limits what the federal agency can do to tackle climate warming emissions from power plants.
In a 6-3 decision, the court's conservative majority ruled the EPA cannot change how the country makes electricity in order to bring down greenhouse gas emissions. The decision is a win for coal-fired power plants and the fossil fuel-producing states that brought the suit, but a blow to the Biden administration. Jody Freeman is an expert on environmental law at Harvard University.
That means that this president and future presidents have fewer options when they want to try to do something significant on climate change.
The Biden administration had pledged to eliminate carbon emissions from power plants by 2035 and will now have to take into consideration this decision when making a new regulation with that aim. Laura Benshoff, NPR News.
President Biden says he would support an exception to the Senate filibuster rule in an effort to protect access to abortion. That's after the U.S. Supreme Court overturned the Roe v. Wade decision. The Democratic president saying today there should be an exception to the filibuster for this action to deal with the Supreme Court decision. Biden's remarks, while they may make his supporters happy, probably will do little to change the outcome in Washington. At least 2 Democratic senators have made it clear they oppose changing the filibuster rule, which would allow a new law to be put in place with a simple majority instead of the 60-vote threshold currently required in the Senate to pass legislation. Texas state troopers will set up their own interior border checkpoints to try to detect illegal immigrants being smuggled inside trucks. As NPR's John Burnett explains, the announcement comes in response to the deaths of 53 migrants trapped in an oven-like tractor trailer found abandoned on a remote road in San Antonio.
The big rig carrying the doomed migrants was able to pass without detection through a federal Border Patrol checkpoint that stops all northbound traffic on Interstate 35. Agents have only seconds to decide if a vehicle is suspicious. The busy Laredo to San Antonio corridor carries 20,000 trucks a day. It's also a major smuggling route. The Texas Department of Public Safety, on orders from Governor Greg Abbott, will begin randomly checking northbound trucks. The Republican governor, a frequent critic of federal border policy, set up state checkpoints at U.S.-Mexico ports of entry earlier this year, but then had to hastily close them when thousands of trucks backed up into Mexico and Mexican officials loudly complained. John Burnett, NPR News.
Key government metric tracked by the Federal Reserve that monitors inflation pressures in the economy was up 6.3% in May compared to the same month a year ago. Report from the Commerce Department showing the effects of painfully high inflation on U.S. households. On Wall Street, the Dow dropped 253 points. This is NPR. Chances of reviving the 2015 Iran nuclear deal appear to be slipping away after indirect talks between the U.S. and Iran ended without progress. That's according to a senior U.S. official who said the prospects for a deal are only going to get worse as time goes by. The official declined to go into details, but European officials have shuttled back and forth between the two sides, trying to revive the agreement. British Prime Minister Boris Johnson is announcing a significant increase in the UK's defence spending over the rest of this decade. Bill and Mark's reports insisting the cost of freedom in relation to Ukraine is, quote, always worth paying.
During a press conference at the end of the NATO summit in Madrid, Johnson said UK defence spending as a proportion of GDP would rise to 2.5%, well above the 2% commitment currently required from NATO members. That could equate to an extra $67 billion by 2030 and may include significant investments in air combat capabilities for a world that Johnson described as, quote, more dangerous. Earlier this week, in a public speech about Russian aggression in Ukraine, the UK Defence Minister Ben Wallace said such spending must rise, quote, before it's too late. Johnson has also promised to train up to 2,500 Ukrainian soldiers in Britain each month as the first few hundred this week continued exercises with long-range rocket systems west of London. For NPR News, I'm Bill and Marks in London.
European Union officials are now saying they're prepared to step in to take the lead when it comes to regulating cryptocurrency at a time prices are plunging, wiping out billions of dollars globally. EU taking the first step on that path today, agreeing to new rules that would subject cryptocurrency transfers to the same money laundering rules as traditional bank transfers. Bigger moves are expected to come. I'm Jack Speer, NPR News in Washington.
How do we reinvent ourselves? And what's the secret to living longer? I'm Anoush Zamarodi. Each week on NPR's TED Radio Hour, we go on a journey with TED speakers to seek a deeper understanding of the world and to figure out new ways to think and create. Listen now.
Welcome back to Universal Truths with Mark Fults. I'm coming to you from WBHM-DB in beautiful Birmingham, Alabama. And then I personally live in beautiful Pensacola, Florida. And I live where it's all pretty and shiny and lots of flowers and water. And then I'm sitting here telling you about all these strange, dark, and mysterious items. So we've been talking about dolls, transference of your energy, transference of self, and that even scientists are trying and succeeding with transferring people's energy into other people's bodies. And now they're going to try and transfer it to computers, which I have a problem with that. But that's not for me to do because it ain't going to be me doing it. But they are doing it. If you don't think they're doing it, you'd be surprised. They're doing it. So one day they'll have it where, you could put yourself into an electronic or digital form. But I don't know what that's, I don't even know how to even think metaphysically how that would be. I could imagine transferring yourself into a vessel like a doll or something. I can understand that. I don't think that the digital thing weirds me out. So that's going to be something, but of course it's maybe my age. Maybe I'm just too old and drab. But I'm kind of like, I don't think I like that. I don't think it's cool that you transfer to other things. Kind of think it's better when you could just, when you die, you transition and go into the next level and do your thing. But the world is so multi-level and so complex in that way, and the spirit is so complex. And you get so many people when their time is up and they're not ready. Because I remember somebody that I knew that died years ago, and the last thing they told their wife was, "I'm not finished yet." And I thought, ooh, that, you don't want to hear that because they may not move through the transition and go on. They may still be trying to live this life. And sometimes haunted items result in that because they're like, oh, I don't want to leave. How can I continue living even marginally in what I considered life? Because when you die, that's it. You have to kind of move on. You've had your experience. You've got to go on to the next thing. It's no longer the life that you knew existing. And sometimes that's what causes discarnate spirits. They just, they're like, I just can't let go. Or they don't know my story. They don't know what happened to me. I have to tell them. And they stay there trying to tell someone that can't hear them what their problem is, who killed me, or why I did this, or why I didn't do that, or what happened to me. You don't know what happened to me. And it becomes like PTSD for spirits. And some of these haunted items sometimes have that issue. They may be dysfunctional. They may be discarnate. They may be even not us kind of consciousness. They could be a different consciousness because there are so many levels of consciousness that are not us. We are just a line of frequency in between that sandwich of frequencies. Because like when I've gone and investigated a haunted hospital, there's a dial tone that I can hear when I go in the hospital. It's been abandoned for 20 years. And if you do that dial tone, it's like you'll go, and you get into it, and you can hear the other spirits. So there's a constant, like a universal spiritual level, and it's amazing, but when you die, hopefully what happens when you die is you go, okay, that, you look forward, you see the people calling you, you see the lights, and you go on through the transference. You transfer yourself. You transfer the self. The soul goes on to where it goes back to. The spirit is what you created. So you transfer yourself from this vessel into the next energy envelope, which takes you to the consciousness. But you have to get out of this body. You have to get out of this space because, at some point, that part's over. And as a spirit, energy is energy. It doesn't just sit still. You're not sitting on a cloud going, oh, la, la, la. You're a vibrating energy. So that vibrating energy has a natural process. If you don't take the natural process, it can throw things off. And then there are a lot of spirits who just don't know what to do. So they stick with being around or in inanimate objects or in things. And so it's you kind of have to get your mind in order so that when it is time, you go. And don't look back. Go do what you got to do, and then you can come back and look at things after you've transitioned. But if you do it before you go, then it can cause problems because your spirit has to feed itself. And if it stays in the body or stays in the atmosphere or stays behind where it has to figure out how to absorb thermal heat or how to get energy from methane gas or from the minerals from decomposing things, it has to figure it out. And sometimes it does it by nature. But sometimes that's what's left. So you can go into an antique store and you'll feel antiques that have something going on with them. And you can tell when there's a spirit. Again, my friend Teal has a haunted dresser. And, sometimes you'll see a woman in it. Sometimes there's a little child that stowed away in it that didn't have a good time. And so sometimes you sense the child, you sense the woman, and it's just because it's just so old, it's lived through so much life, it has a life of its own. And, but that's, hopefully you're understanding what I'm saying, that you can transfer yourself into stuff, but you need to be careful. And I've known people who've tried to transfer a bit of their consciousness into stuff to see if they could do it. But the thing is, once you've done it, you can't just undo it. It's like it has a life of its own. And it may not be fair to do it to that. So you have to think about being ethical. Be very ethical. Now, we're going to go into the second part, which is in the book I wrote. The doll thing is one aspect of it. But there are people, modern people, that are doing things that I think are so primitive that they're so disjointed from people that they're so disconnected. It's like they can't have relationships with real people. So they choose dolls, or they choose corpses and treat them as dolls, or treat them as vessels for spirits. And it's actually, unfortunately, there are quite a few modern stories of this. So I'll have to tell you why I wrote that book. The person who molested me when I was 8. They got in a lot of trouble, of course, in the 70s and 80s. So for some reason, like some of these other stories I'll tell you, they became fascinated with deceased people in a way that was very, 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 very unhealthy. And this person became fascinated with getting a deceased child. And he got caught on other things, so he didn't get to do that. But he did go to jail for other things. But they found out in the process, and his family knew he was doing this, that he had gotten fascinated with this story of a little boy who had gotten killed in the wreck back in the 70s. And so he found out where the boy had lived. He rented that house. He found out where the boy was buried. He went and would read stories at the boy's gravesite. He was starting to focus on trying to build himself up to get the nerve to acquire this poor little thing. And thank goodness he was too lazy for that. He was too lazy. And but when they caught him, he had gone to a funeral home, made funeral arrangements, and left clothing for a little boy, and said, my son's in the hospital. He's going to die. When he does, I'm going to have him sent here. And the thing was, he didn't have a child. So he had somebody targeted. And they caught him. They stopped that. And but I thought, surely there aren't more stories like that. And unfortunately, there were. But then I started to see how some of them did treat them like dolls, that they were people. So it's kind of like a reverse, ancient, primitive, strange thing. One of the most famous stories like that is from Key West. And there was a guy named Carl Tansler. And he was just a kook. He was a kook. Very smart, but a kook. And in like 1930 or something like that, he called himself a count. I don't think he was. But he would lie to people and got into a hospital, working in a hospital as a radiologist. And he believed one of his ancient spirits, one of his family's spirits, had appeared to him, said, you're going to find this lovely, tanned, dark-haired girl, and she's going to be your true love. And so he worked in the hospital in Key West as a radiologist, and this girl, beautiful girl, Elena Hayos, I think is what her name was, came in, and she had TB. But when he saw her, he said, that's the girl from my vision. And he just started fawning over her. And the family thought he was a real doctor. So they were poor. They couldn't get a lot of and there wasn't a lot of high-tech TB treatments back then. Millions of people died from TB. And he would steal equipment from the hospital, bring it to her house, and treat her. And who knows? And they thought he was a real doctor, and he wasn't. So who knows what he did to her? He could have made her die quicker. But she died. He was fawning over her all the time and all that. And but we're going to have to go to a commercial break. But when we come back, I'll continue this story. So all of you out there in the dark, don't touch that dial. We'll be right back.
Warning, the following message does not necessarily reflect the views of WBHM-DB or its hosts, guests, listeners, or of any functioning adult in general. In fact, Frank should probably seek professional help. Listener discretion is advised.
Hi there, Frank Lee here. I thought that I would spend a few moments telling you about the positivity from the network here. The overall message of para-unity and happiness, and how everyone here wants to get along with everyone out there, and how everything is just wonderful. Wait, Cat's not looking. Okay, I've got something to really tell you. Okay, so I'm going to tell you what's really going on. Honestly, all that being nice and positive crap was kind of hurting my soul, as dark as it is. So, what's really happening? Well, you see it all the time. Everybody and their brother out there has a paranormal team because they watched a couple of episodes of Ghost Hunters or some crap like that. So they go and they spend half their mortgage payment on tools and things that light up that they don't understand. And then the next logical step after buying matching black t-shirts and posing like 90s rappers for their Facebook page is to, of course, have their own podcast. Well, you know what? You're not going to find that crap here. What we have here at WBHM Digital Broadcasting is the best host, the best guest, bringing you real information. All of the hosts here on this network know their stuff. They are the people who have been out there doing the work, doing actual research. And no, by research, I don't mean binge watching some kind of cheesy TV show on Netflix. I mean reading books. I mean out in the field doing the legwork. And who are they interviewing on their shows? They're bringing you the people they have learned from. They're bringing you the best in the field, covering all kinds of topics from UFOs and aliens to Bigfoot to cryptozoology to ghosts to anything you can think of. A bit strange and unexplained. It is here, and you're going to get the best information here. So stay tuned to WBHM Digital Broadcasting. Don't go anywhere. Speaking of going somewhere, I've got to go before my mic gets cut. We'll see you there on WBHM-DB.
Welcome back to Universal Truths with Mark Fults, coming to you from WBHM-DB in beautiful Birmingham, Alabama. And I'm coming to you from beautiful Pensacola, Florida. And we were just talking about Carl Tanzler and his doll. Like I said, this man had been lying to the family, to the hospital. He was a radiologist, but he was lying to the family saying he was a doctor. And he was fawning all over Elena Hoyos, and she died. She was like in her 20s. She was very young, beautiful. And he was heartbroken. And he kept telling her while she was alive, he loved her, and she didn't respond, but he was trying to help her, so she let him help her. But of course, since he was lying, he could have done things that have made it worse. Who knows? But when she died, he offered to build a little mausoleum for her, and the parents allowed that because they were all kind of poor, I think. And her mother gave him a clipping of her hair, and they just thought he was in love with her. Well, he was so obsessed with her, they didn't know that he had a key to the mausoleum, and he was going to the mausoleum every night to visit and talk with Elena. And he did that for about 18 months. And then he got tired of doing that, and he thought, I'm going to bring her home. So he went with a little red Ryder wagon. So your little red wagon. When we were kids, people still had red wagons. But he had a little kid's little red wagon. He went in the middle of the night into a cemetery unlocked the mausoleum, put her in the wagon, took her home. Nobody saw it. And he had a death mask made of her, a plaster death mask. So he took her and made, with wax and plaster and things like that, he made a full-size mannequin around her remains and put the face on her and made his own Elena doll. And he thought she was living because he had put a phone into the place too. I think somebody said that he would call in and talk to the spirit every night, call her and talk to her on the phone like he's talking to her. So he made her into a human-sized doll. And he had her for 7 years. And he would, what got him caught was he just considered her his wife. And so he started going around, and people were seeing him buying dresses for his wife, perfume for his wife, treats for his wife. And they're going, who's his wife? And they saw him in his house through the windows, dancing with this figure. And when he kept saying the name Elena, they finally kind of went, oh. And it finally got back to Elena's family. And she had a sister, which I love the sister. She just went right up to the door, banged on it. He came to it, and she said, I want to see my sister. Take me to my sister. And he took her into the bedroom where she lived and said, now that you know we're here, you can come and visit us anytime you want. Because he thought she was alive. And that didn't end well. The cops got involved. He got arrested, but because it was mishandling of a corpse, he had already, what would you say, it passed the time frame that he could have been punished with, so he didn't get really punished. They thought he was nuts, which he was, and if you look at pictures of him, he's a little old geezer. And they reburied her secretly, so he couldn't find her because they wanted her back. And he had been building a spaceship kind of thing because he thought, and this is in the 30s, like 1939, 40, and he thought he was going to put her into that spaceship and go into outer space, and the radiation would bring her back to life. And people thought this was really a love story. So they thought it was a strange, melancholy love story. No, he's a little pervert. I tried to contact Elena's spirit to make sure she was okay, and she was. She had transferred, and she had transferred. She was fine, but the spirits talking for her were like, he's a dirty old man, clamp like a slam a door. So it's like she really didn't like that. So, but they thought it was like a beautiful love story. And actually, when they found her body, they put her in a funeral home, and thousands of people paid to come see it. And they brought people from school, children from school, to see this. And so it was a fairly strange thing. But he treated that body as a vessel, and he felt like her spirit was in that vessel. And but there are other stories. When you open that closet, then another bone falls out, and another bone falls out. Another thing of people treating corpses as dolls. There was a man called Anatoly Moskvin. Now, this is just like 5 or 6 years ago, I believe, or maybe 7 now. He's in Russia. He was like 38 years old at the time of his arrest. But he was a historian on cemeteries and family histories and stuff. This is before, over there it was pre-internet for them. And he would go, he had all the information on like 700 cemeteries and things like this. And he was a strange little boy who grew into a strange little man. And when he was little, a little friend of his, a little girlfriend of his died, and they forced him to kiss her at the funeral, and it did something to him. And my grandmother, when her dad died in like 1906, she was like 6 years old, they forced her to kiss her dad in a casket, and it freaked her out. But in his case, it set up some kind of other mentality. And so when he got older, he wanted to have a daughter. And, of course, they went, nope, because they could tell something was off with this dude. So when he was researching these cemeteries, he did what he considered a Celtic technique, which was he would lay on the graves and talk to the graves and talk to the spirit, and then eventually he would hear the spirit. So he started doing that, but he started laying on little girls' graves, and he knew all the information about them. And so he became fascinated with talking with them, and then he got tired of laying on the graves in the cold and the dark and all this stuff, and he thought, I'm bringing them home. So if he talked to the spirit and it told him, take me home, or what he thought, whatever, he would dig them up, take them home. Nobody would know he did it. And they said he desecrated about 150 graves. But he took eventually 26 bodies home with him from the age of like 3 to 15. And he wasn't doing something necrophiliac with them kind of thing. He really looked at them as his form of a child. He would take the bodies, cover them in hosiery and stuff like that, and paint faces on them and everything, and have them and collect them. His parents, who were away a lot of the time, when they would visit him, they thought he was collecting, it was a hobby or something, collecting dolls. And he wasn't. He collected like 26 of these dolls. And one of the corpses was a little girl named Olga who had been murdered. And her parents had no clue. And he stole that body and had her 7 years. And then what he would do is he would have parties with them, watch videos, have their birthday parties, had all their information. But then he started torturing the parents, and he would put these notes on the graves, like, you left her in the dark, da-da-da. And if they didn't have a good tombstone, he'd say, you better put a tombstone or I'm going to smash it. And he just tortured them for years, and they had no clue that he had already taken their babies. So his parents, one time, they came back a few years ago from a trip, and they realized there was something going on. And he got arrested. And then he was very unapologetic about it. He was just like, oh, no, they're my babies. And he felt like he had gone and taken them from the dark. He would say, I got them out of the dark. You left them in the cold. I took them home and got them warm. And if you look him up, I know Charlie Moskin, they're just everywhere. He had them all over his house. He was a hoarder. So there's all this stuff, but he would lose interest with the ones he didn't feel like were vibrating energy or have as much spirit in them. And then he would put them in the storage part. The rest of them that were more vibrational, he had them all over his house. They were sitting in the chairs, by the bed, by the TV. And he just thought that was normal. But that was his friends. He didn't have friends. He was respected, but his personal self, he just saw that as normal. And I think right now he's in a psychiatric facility, which he should be forever. But, at some point, he didn't murder them, so they may let him out at some point. Who knows? And if they do, it was such a strong thing, I think he'll just go right back to doing it. And I just can't imagine those parents, what they went through. But the thing is that he was mad at them. He thought they had abandoned their children, so he took them home and gave them a new life. And so that's one modern story of this kind of stuff. And there were other things like that, when you look at the stories, it just gets a little weirder, and a little weirder. And that's why I started doing a book about it at that time, because I thought it was just so there. And, but these people who do these kind of things, they don't have friends. They don't have, and to them, they're loners, they stick to themselves, and that's the thing I think in society. We have to watch out. We have a lot of kids and stuff that they're disconnected. They're listening to all their electronics, but they can't talk to people. They are having classes in college for you to be able to learn how to have a face-to-face conversation with someone, because they don't know how now. And so they look at things like that differently. There's two stories of women who did these kind of things. Karen Greenlee, the way she got caught was she was a funeral director, but she was taking a body to the gravesite of a 33-year-old man, very good looking apparently, and she was taking the body to the gravesite. They were waiting. The parents are standing there waiting for the funeral. She got within sight of them. She did a donut and took off and stole that body, and they caught her. And then they found out she had been doing things she shouldn't for years. And then she became like a folk hero. And she wrote a book about her experiences and her thoughts. And actually, there's another one, Leila Lindo. I think she died just a few years ago. She wrote books kind of like necromantics, how you use the body, because to her she would use the bodies of deceased people to call spirits like Azrael from the corpse itself. So she would use bodies, steal the bodies, do whatever, or what, I don't know if she was stealing them, allegedly, or whatever she was doing. But she would talk about, just getting in someone's mausoleum and, take a crowbar and a candelabra and go break in the mausoleum and, have a good time and call in a couple of spirits through the corpse and without permission of the person's body, the person who owned the body, and have your time and your way with it and do magic with it and then let it go. And they are considered cutting-edge necrophiliacs because kids kind of think it's a folk hero thing, and it's like, it's not a folk hero thing. That's gross. And to me personally, I think that the family who paid $10,000 to put that person in a grave or in a mausoleum, they have the say whether you can use those bodies. And a lot of these people feel like, they're just up for grabs because they're out there. And that's like, no, this person, and they know you. They wouldn't want you doing this kind of stuff with them, I don't think. And I'm sure there are people who would. They should make their own society if that's what they want. But they were just going for these people who had no clue. And I would lose my freaking marbles, wouldn't you? If I found that somebody did that to a friend of mine or a family member, I would lose my mind. And because I guess I'm just too settled in my ways or old or something. I'm traditional. I think, you shouldn't have that happening. But these people were doing it. And I think it's coming from a thing of, like I said, these loners that get fantasies with people. They can't have relations with people, so they're not afraid to do that. And I have some other stories that other people are doing that are weird. There was I think it's called Bradenton, Florida. There's a funeral home there in the 90s. I think it was 1999. And they found a man's hand in the river. And they identified it through fingerprints, and it was a man who had already died, been processed and buried. So they dug him up and found out that the funeral director was using his corpse. Now, this is ritual. She was using his corpse to do spells against her competitors. So she had used the hand in like a Hand of Glory spell. She had packed his casket full, like 100-something voodoo dolls, to do spells on her competitors. So that kind of shut that down. So that was something just recent. I mean, that was in the 90s. So that was somebody using a reverse thing where you're using the corpse as a conduit for either spirit work or magic work. So, you kind of got to keep your eyes on these people, on these systems. If you don't hold them and everything, you got to watch them. So now, we're going to be going to a break in a minute, and when we get back, I'll cover something that's still going on, ghost marriages. I think you'll be interested in that one. It's just too out there for most people, but it's something that's happening, and it's a result of people not having enough men and women to fulfill a need, so they do ghost marriages, and it gets weird. And all this other stuff I told you is fairly normal compared to this. So, but we're going to have to go to a break. So all of you out there in the dark, don't touch that dial, and we'll be right back.
You are listening to WBHM Digital Broadcasting, the best in paranormal talk, only on Paranormal Experience Radio, broadcasting live out of Birmingham, Alabama.
Oh, come on. I'm Southern, but... nope. That'll do. Hello. I am Kat Hobson, host of Paranormal Experience here on WBHM Digital Broadcasting out of Birmingham, Alabama. I enjoy having guests from all areas of the paranormal, from ghosts to ufology to cryptids and beyond. You'll find some of the best researchers in their fields bringing you some great information. Join me on Wednesday nights from 8 to 10 p. Eastern here on WBHM Digital Broadcasting.
Since 1948, Fate magazine has brought you reports of the strange and unknown, all of them true. Fate Radio is carrying on that tradition, bringing you the unusual, macabre, strange, and bizarre. Join host Kat Hobson Sunday nights from 8 to 10 p.m. Eastern on WBHM Digital Broadcasting.
Listening to WBHM Digital Broadcasting, the best in paranormal talk, only on Paranormal Experienced Radio, broadcasting live out of Birmingham, Alabama.
Welcome back to Universal Truths with Mark Fults, coming to you from WBHM-DB in beautiful Birmingham, Alabama. And I live in beautiful Pensacola, Florida. And we're talking weird stuff. Now, before we get into ghost marriages, I also want to talk about, I found this picture of this man in a casket with these two great big dolls, since we're talking about dolls, by his casket. And I thought, why? What's that? It was real strange looking. And I thought, why? Was he a ventriloquist or something? They were just like 3-foot tall dolls. And I found out that they said, well, he had two daughters. And in some of the older parts of Russia and Ukraine, things like that, if someone dies that you love, you transfer their soul into a doll. Then the person who's going to have the baby next takes that doll and then transfers the soul into the new infant. And to me, in metaphysics, that's what about the, and I was talking with Kat. What happens to the soul that's already in the infant? So you could create a multiple personality issue doing that, but they do it. They take the soul in the doll, then take and transfer this. It's another transference of self. So they just look at it as a normal thing. I think it would be the spirit that comes with the baby might have something to say about that, but I would see where that would cause a problem. But it's a solution in some of the old countries. Now, this last part, I'm going to talk a little bit about something that is still going on called ghost marriages, and it happens in places like real primitive parts of China and stuff like that. They have the thing of where they don't allow that many little girl babies to live. So what has happened is you have a shortage of women for men. There's more men than there are women. So there are a lot of guys that are dying that are not married. And in their culture, you got to be married. You got to have this. It's the ancestor soul thing. So they came up with a solution, which if a single woman dies, the family, if they have a son dies, and he's not married, they can go to someone else who's got a daughter who's dying. They can pay them, make a marriage, a ghost marriage for their son, between the son and this girl. And as soon as the girl is dead, or if, they take the body and the spirit, and they have a wedding. And they'll have a union, and they'll have all these gifts, and they make like paper mache items that represent what you would have in your life as a married person, and then you burn those in a ceremony. But sometimes they have it where you could just pay for the soul to be in the paper mache copy, but then a lot of them buy the actual girl, and it's real weird. To them, it's a great thing. And if someone hears there's a girl dying in the hospital that's not married, sometimes the families will get in a bidding war for her body and her soul. And to them, it's a sad occasion and also a happy one, because their child would be married. So that makes it okay for their spirit. So their spirit will be settled, and it won't have any problems, but they don't know the girl they're marrying, and vice versa. The girl doesn't know. And actually, they even have a thing where sometimes living women who don't really want to have a husband per se, but they don't have a family to take care of them, they can be paid to become the bride of someone's dead son, and then they move in and take care of the family. So the son isn't there to take care of his family, so she takes that spot. So it gives her a life and a protection and a family, and it gives them happiness to think that he's married and not his spirit, because they're very afraid of ghosts, and they want to make sure that they're not disrupted spirits or discarnate spirits. So to them, it's not too bad of a solution. But the problem is there, because it's a big business. And if there's a shortage, which there always is, there are black market routes that some people take, where they they'll go steal bodies and then clean them up and act like, it's above board, and they'll sell the soul and the body to the family off of a body they just went and stole out of a grave. Or they have a black market thing where they actually, unfortunately, are killing people and then passing them off as legal corpse brides or ghost marriage brides. So it always has its weirder edge. But to them, the ones that are doing it and that are really old-fashioned, to them it's a solution that makes the soul settled. It means they're taken care of, and then it also adds. Sometimes it adds a daughter to the family. And if she has a child or something from someone else, they can say it's from the spirit. So it becomes, they get accepted. And like I said, for some women where it's hard, you have to have a family. Sometimes they just let you come in and all of a sudden you're part of the family. And to me, that I understand it, but it's still like an alien landscape for me. But when I was seeing all these things, and there's so much more. It's really a dark rabbit hole, but there's so many stories of it. But in a way, I think they should study it a little bit, because I know for here, there's a rise in other countries, of people are buying life-sized dolls to be their partners. And actually, if they feel like they're finished with the doll, sometimes they'll even have a funeral for it. But they treat them as their partner, and they'll take them. They take them out, buy food, take them on trips, and there is actually a thing of where they have spirit dolls that people take, and they'll buy airplane tickets for these dolls, and they'll set the seat next to them. So for us, when we go, ooh, a haunted doll, it's a whole different thing. These people, the body is still a vessel. It's still carrying the spirit, or it's carrying a vessel, or it's a conduit to pull energy from, or to call spirits into the body, or to become their friends. So instead of a Barbie, they have deceased people, and the things that go along with that don't bother them, like decomposition or it being illegal, or to them it's okay because they don't deal with people. They can deal with a dead person. They don't have to emotionally. They don't have to have arguments. They don't have to worry about who's going to pay for the meal. They're not going to complain because you're not pretty, or that you're not a nice-looking man. They're not going to complain about your house. They're not going to question you. They're there, and they're like a movie screen, and these people are projecting their thoughts onto them. But again, like with the doll thing, if you have a figure like that and you're projecting, then you can put your energy into it and cause it to have a consciousness that, once you create a consciousness, you don't, it's like having a toddler, it's out of control. You have no control on that. And so people do this all the time, and then they're making energies and consciousnesses and new, not spirits, but I'll just call them consciousnesses. But just putting something out there that shouldn't exist, but it's happening. And it's not going away. It's kind of growing, and I think that the people who are disenfranchised, who are lonely, these things aren't so abnormal to them, but they are abnormal to me. So you can do your own research, but I don't know. I think maybe socially they need to figure out what's going on with people where this is okay. Instead of going out and being around your friends or being in college or having dates, this is what they're doing because they're not afraid of those people. They're afraid of me and you and anyone that likes to talk and think and compare. They don't want that. They want someone to project their fantasies on. Or magically, people are using bodies, but it looks real odd to us. But in the primitive days, I mean, they would use bodies for magic and spirits and work, either to talk through the vessel to get information or to use it as a vessel or a weapon, to, like the lady who used all the voodoo dolls to strike at people. She was using a corpse as a weapon, as a tool. So it's hopefully it hasn't been too weird for you, but it is something that I look at and I just can't believe it. And so that's why I share some of the weird things that I see and hear, because I'm like, what do you think about that? But I know for me, if it happened to someone I know, I would lose my marbles. They would have to run. They'd have to put this person somewhere really safe, because I would be wanting to go, you did what? I'd be wanting to chase them down the street. And there are no real laws to protect the dead. So it's, and which I think there should be. I think it should be, I think there should be something to protect the families. But I don't even know how you would approach that. So maybe that's something they need to discuss. But, people, if you don't think this stuff was happening, I mean, in the 50s here, they were still doing grave robbing to sell the bodies to medical places before we got more modern. And I know there was a grave down in Alabama, not down the street from here, that they stole like 120 bodies. And that was in the 50s. But the 50s are that long ago. I was born in 62, so just 3 years before that was the 50s, couple of years. So it's not that foreign, but it is getting a little weirder. So, well, we're coming to the end of our show. I hope you enjoyed some of this. And if you ever come to Florida and you want to meet me, give me a call at Live and Let Live Metaphysical Store. And if you need to go get metaphysical supplies, Sal Gandolfo and Matthew Ferguson run the store. They can help you with your metaphysical needs. And there's two other psychics beside me that we're all in the same age group. We're all about 60. And so we all have a different aspect of how to help you spiritually or metaphysically, what you need. And if we can't help you, we'll figure out where you can go to get help. But we usually can fill the bill. So I hope that you've had a good evening. And I will be back next Thursday, same bat time, same bat channel kind of thing. And I hope that y'all have a great week. And to all of you out there in the dark, we'll see you again in a week. So try not to get in too much trouble. See you then.
You are listening to WBHM Digital Broadcasting, Birmingham, Alabama.